So we're going to take it to the Wild West this hand because this is a street poker hand that probably should never have happened. What's up guys, Ben here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today we have the 7th episode of Road Back to High Stakes. So my results this week were pretty uneventful, very similar to last week, so I'm not going to spend any time on the graph this week, but I will chuck up an image now just so you're all caught up. One thing I quickly wanted to touch on was the state of the Ignition games, and it is absolutely horrendous at the moment. Multiple cheaters on every single table that I've been playing, downloading the hands the next day and seeing showdowns that can only mean cheating. So I will be talking about this a lot more in next week's video, so if you are interested in that, please do go ahead and subscribe. I think it could be really helpful to have a video out there actually showing what's going on as a way of forcing security teams to be better and do better. So we'll talk about that next week, but let's get into today's hands. So we have two multi-way bizarre hands versus recreationals and regs. We absolutely blast one off to a recreational in what seems to be a very, very standard theme of all of these videos. I just can't help myself apparently. And then we have a very large 400 big blind pot where we shove the river and hopefully we're going to get a fold. So here we are with Queen 9 suited in the small blind and we get open from an aggressive recreational on the button to 3x. We go ahead and 3-bet a hand every time. Our reads on this player were that they were very call happy, very stab happy, and overall pretty aggressive and stationary. We flop a flush draw on 8-7 deuce, and I do think checking is okay here. I also think betting is viable too. I think some of the merits for betting are that we make better hands fold, some king highs, some ace highs, etc. But also I do think versus this kind of player who is very, very stabby, we could also go ahead and check raise or check call as well. I'm pretty indifferent either way to all of those options. I think with 2 overs and not having the best flush draw here, I do prefer to lean on the side of bet though. So I go ahead and bet 2/3 pot. I think half pot is also okay here. I even think 1/3 pot versus a recreational will be absolutely fine. They do call and we see an interesting 8 bringing a second flush draw. So I think versus a lot of recreationals here, we can definitely continue barreling. But versus this particular recreational, I do believe they will have way more 8x than they're meant to. Admittedly, that makes up a very small portion of the range. And the main reason I'm checking the turn is that I know that in position was very, very, very bet happy. And I believe that check shoving is probably going to be a better line here, given they're going to be stabbing in position a lot more than global here. So when villain goes ahead and bets 1/3 pot in position, we're not overly surprised. See, my understanding of this spot was actually that this would be an over bet folded spot by population, but I have since been told by a very, very good 1K reg that this is actually under bet folded from recreationals in this node. Now, I'm not sure what the source of that is. However, I definitely do trust this particular player to know this spot better than I do. But in game, I just assume that this is going to be a spot that's over bet folded. My hand does pretty well as a check shove. It makes some better hands fold, but also when I do get called, I have a reasonable amount of equity versus the range. So I do go ahead and shove, and we get a very, very long tank from the recreational. And they do call a very well played Jack-7 of spades for the ultimate ownage. We run it twice, and on this occasion, we do lose both. So it would seem, in a shocking turn of events, that I don't know what I'm talking about in this spot. And here we have King 10 of hearts on the button, and I'd like to get my excuses in early. This hand is questionable to say the least, but the reason it's questionable mainly is because I'm pretty sure that player 1 is a bot, and you might ask why he's still at the table then. I was leaving next hand in the big blind, so that is why. The reason I thought this player was a bot is that they have the very same tendencies as most of the other bots that have been on my other tables, or perhaps I am just deluded and I've got monsters under the bed and I'm looking for as many excuses as possible. Either way, let's take a look at the hand. We do get 3-bet by the presumed, let's say, bot now, and we go ahead and defend King 10 of hearts on the button. We see Jack-6 deuce with a flush draw. So going back to what I said, they were using big sizes very quickly, very often. So I think in theory, this is going to be a very low frequency call. However, I do think that OOP is going to have way more shit in their range that they shouldn't have based on the showdowns that I had seen previously. So I do believe that calling this hand is going to be okay. I'm not going to lie though, I did call always. And I still think even versus this kind of player type, it's just going to be too much. So that's probably an error on my part. See, I even consider a raise on the flop. So this is a spot where I'm not going to be raising, I don't believe. But versus a player that we assume to be a potential bot, and also c-betting big very often, a very good way to counter that is to be increasing your raising frequency in position. Regardless of that, I do elect to just call on this occasion and turn a flush draw on the 3 of hearts. See, I think this again is a bit of a mistake. So villain goes ahead and checks. So in theory, in ordinary situations here, for 100 big blinds, you're going to depolarize the turn and you're going to be using a small sizing when you do bet. But as you get deeper, there's going to be more of a mix between very small and then like big-ish, so something like 25% and 70% or something like that. I do believe that because this player type was c-bet and the flop extremely high frequency, I do believe that their check fold frequency should go up. I think my main mistake here is that these players are notorious for check raising the turn, and that is unfortunately what happens on this occasion. So in hindsight, I would have liked to have seen myself check back the flop. So it doesn't take villain long, it takes them about 4 seconds to go ahead and check raise to 50% pot. I have no choice now but to call. I actually do think shoving isn't a bad option here. I do believe that OOP is going to have enough bluffs here, simply based on the knowledge that we have about how bots are playing in the ignition pool. Sadly, this time we do go ahead and just call. And we absolutely brick out with the 8 of spades, and villain pretty quickly goes ahead and checks to us. So I do believe that OOP is going to have some check folds here. I think they're going to have some king queen, some ace queen, some ace tens. I think they're even going to have hands like queen 10 suited, and maybe even queen 10 offsuit and that kind of thing. Perhaps because they know that population overstabs in position and they can attack, and then once they do get called, they are versus a very strong range. All that considered though, when they do check, I pretty much am going to check my nut flush draws for what I believe to be some amount of EV. It would be absolutely a disaster to not shove here and then lose to a hand like king queen. I know that's maybe one combo, or a hand like, I don't know, like ace 7 of diamonds or something like that. It would be an absolute disaster. So with that in mind, I do go ahead and shove my hand always for half pot, and we get absolutely turbo snapped by the 0% frequency ace 8 play. Shouldn't be any turn check raisers with this combo, and as played, even river is going to be a check fold as well. Perhaps there are monsters under the bed. You guys let me know. Have I just been owned here? Am I reading way too much into my reads here? And the fact that this player might be a bot, I would be very interested to hear what people think. So we're going to take it to the Wild West this hand, because this is a street poker hand that probably should never have happened. So we get a cold call from the small blind versus a 2x open from a reg. Small blind is a large whopper. We go ahead and defend the big blind with a 6 of diamonds, and we see 10-9-3 with a flush draw. We go ahead and check it to in position, who goes ahead and checks it back. We see a queen of hearts on the turn, bringing a second flush draw, and recreational very quickly leads out for half pot. Can't really read too much into this. This recreational was very, very stab happy and bluff happy, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is just like a load of king 10 and queen 5 and queen 8 and those kind of hands. I do think raising is okay, but I think in position does have good hands here, at least some of the time. So I don't want to just be raising and then getting 3-bet and then probably having to fold my hand. I do actually think raising is probably okay on the turn, but I do prefer to raise a hand like, I don't know, king 6 of diamonds if I'm going to do it. So I'd like to play a little game now, and I would like people to write in the comments and not hit send just yet. What do we think in position's range looks like here? Do we think it is at hands as weak as ace queen or king queen or queen jack? Or do we believe it is pretty much going to be mostly king jack, maybe some jack 8 suited, maybe some queen 10, some queen 9, and then obviously some pocket queens as well? What do we reckon the range looks like? Either way, when the recreational does call the small blind, I think reopening the action here would be an absolute disaster. So I just want to realize my equity. I think my implied odds versus the reg are actually not very good here, but versus the recreational, who's going to make plenty of errors on the river, I do think calling is going to be making us a lot of money. So we see the 3 of hearts on the river, pairing the board and bringing in a turn flush draw, and OOP decides to check to us. So depending on what you think in position has on the turn, what do we now believe in position has? Do we think that they have more flushes? Do we think that they have plenty of king jack? And when small blind snaps checks to us, what do we believe that they have? My understanding here was that the small blind can definitely have a few flushes, but given the nature of the way in which this player played, I do believe that they're going to have a whole load of one pair and open-ender and that kind of thing that have now bricked. I also do believe that when the flush completes, they would probably be leading out most of the time with these hands. As we know, recreationals like to telegraph their hands, and this doesn't really seem like a spot that they'd want to trap. Now, when we think about the in-position reg, I certainly believe that the in-position reg can have pocket queens sometimes, but I think there are way more combos of hands like king jack, queen 9, queen 10. I think there are going to be small amounts of flushes, but I think those hands are going to be far more prevalent in the range. The other thing to mention is that when we call the flop and then overcall the turn, we definitely can have some 10-3 and some queen-3 suited as well. Admittedly, perhaps we block a few nut flush draws from in position. Maybe there's like an ace-jack that's check back the flop and then bet, but those are very few combos. All things considered, I believe as the big blind, we fill up our value on the river here way more than in position does. I mean, what is in position going to do here with king-jack, which is probably the hand that I assume them to have most of the time, and like queen 10 or queen 9 as well. And obviously we're never going to make pocket queens fold. We're not trying to do that. So holding that all in mind, I decide to make what is an extremely questionable bluff on the river. I don't believe in position is going to call king jack on the river versus 2/3 or all in, and I definitely don't want to put in my entire stack against pocket queens on the occasions that they do have that combo. You may question that this is a terrible combo selection, but literally what else do I have to bluff? I can't call the turn with any other hands that choose to bluff the river. It's pretty much always and only going to be a combo diamond draw. And we get a very, very long tank from in position. And luckily on this occasion, they do fold. Recreational shows us 2 pair, and we show the 6 of diamonds. So yeah, let me know what you think of this hand. Is this just absolute I mean, obviously it's spew, but let me know what you think about it out of 10. So here we have pocket 8 in MP, and we get an open from a reg. We have a very, very low frequency 3-bet, and this is one of those times. We then quickly get cold called by a recreational, and this is just going to be pretty unanimous with most recreational players. It's going to be pocket pairs, it's going to be ace queen, it's going to be ace king, and then it's going to be some suited connectors. We see 6-5-3 rainbow, and under the gun starts out with a check. Now I think under the gun actually does hit this board a little bit more 3-way than they would heads up. Reason for that is I think they're going to be folding a lot of their 6s and 5s to 3-bets when I 3-bet. They're going to obviously mix, and then there's going to be some 6-5 and 7-6 that they, and some 5-4 that they may well fold a little bit pre-flop as well. But when a recreational cold calls in position, under the gun is now never going to fold any of those hands, I don't think. I do decide to check based on my reads on the recreational having quite a well-defined range and us not doing that well on this board. 7 of spades technically is a card that we should never really hit because we shouldn't really 3-bet 7s or 8s that much pre-flop. Again, it's going to be a frequency thing, so we will have it occasionally. Do turn an open-ender. Don't think we're doing that well on this board still. Still a little bit unsure about what their in-position recreational will have. Can still have 10s, can still have jacks. Don't really want to start blasting my hand, so I go ahead and check. Recreational very quickly checks, and then we see a really interesting 4 of clubs, which brings a 5 straight on board. And then out of position goes ahead and bets 1.5x pot. So my initial thought here was that I need to be just shoving every single time, and you can probably see I slide up the bet slider not too long after that. Then I actually let myself think about it a little bit more, and I realized that it's way more likely that in position is going to call as well if I just call, given there's a 5 straight on board. Recreational might just go, oh well, I chop and I'm just going to call always. And then the second thing to mention is that the reg just doesn't really have any 8s here. They're going to have pocket 8 only, the occasional 7-8 that might lead the flop. It may have bet the turn. I think all things considered, I just don't see the reg bet calling a hand like king queen here for half the pot in a spot where I definitely could occasionally have 8s, admittedly very, very discounted. So I do decide to call, hoping to bait the recreational in and expecting to win or chop nearly always if the recreational folds. And fortunately, the plan does work out this time. Well, recreational doesn't call, but we do catch the bluff versus king 10 of diamonds. So thank you again for watching. I know there were some very, very speculative hands today, so please do let me know what you thought of those. And as I said, next week we're going to be releasing the video with a few more hands from bots and my general thoughts on the ignition pool. So until next time, take care, and I'll see you at the tables.